I remember being wheeled in right before surgery, and my surgeon said, "All right, we're getting this out so we can start this family." And I was so ready at that time. So in June 2024, so it was a day before my father-in-law's funeral, I woke up with an extremely high fever, physically exhausted, couldn't move. It was between 103, 104. I truly was convinced it was brought on by exhaustion. It was a long 2 weeks leading up to it. It was very sudden, very emotional. I thought I eat really well, I'm healthy, I'm a fitness instructor, I'm just really tired and exhausted from all this. So I tried taking Tylenol, doing all the things to help reduce the fever, but it wasn't reducing. It was just getting higher. So my husband, Ryan, finally convinced me to go to the ER. And the only thing in my mind that day was, tomorrow is the funeral. We have to be there. And I remember right when I went into the ER, saying, "I can't stay here. I can't stay here overnight. So we need to figure it out." And once we got to the hospital, they gave me every test possible. So I received the fluids. There were no other symptoms besides the high fever and exhaustion. The blood work was normal. So they sent me in for a CT scan. And once the CT scan came back, they found lung nodules. And the doctor really convinced me that most lung nodules are benign and they were from a leftover infection, but he was going to consult with a pulmonologist just for further testing and evaluation. So once I got the bag of fluids and got all that, the fever was going down. So at that point, I left. We went to schedule the pulmonologist then. So within a day, I got a phone call with the pulmonologist team, and they wanted more tests. So they reiterated, though, that although most of them are benign, there are some that aren't. So I got an MRI. So I got an MRI, and at that point, they said, "You know what? They're right on the edge. So we're going to do a watch and wait for these, because based on the size of them." But they said that they noticed something else on the MRI, and it was my liver. And at that point, I thought, what else? Because it was just going down my body at that point. And they were going to refer me to a gastroenterologist. And I thought, wow, another doctor we're going to go through and see. So once I got to the gastroenterologist, again, another test, another MRI, another ultrasound. And I remember going into the doctor's office, and she said, if this was a test for the boards or certification that I was going to take, this is textbook. You're a 33-year-old female who's been on birth control a really long time. It's a hepatic adenoma. It's fueled by hormones. So my biggest concern at that point was my husband and I wanted to start a family. We've been together for a really long time. We decided to do things a little backwards, and that's us. And we wanted to live our life before we started a family. So that was my number one concern. I want to get pregnant. What does that look like for me? And they said, based on the location of that, it would be considered a high-risk pregnancy. There is a chance that because it would be blood-filled, they said that it could rupture. And that could be really dangerous for both me as well as the baby at that point, if I were to get pregnant. So I said, okay, what are my options? And at that point, I was referred to a surgeon. I was also in discussions about getting an embolism as well. Or the third option was just let it be. And being off of birth control, it could possibly decrease on its own. So I remember going back and forth. At first, my husband was like, "We're not going to go through and have half of your liver removed. Like, no way." But then I thought, why not? If my liver is healthy and it can regenerate and grow back, and I can still get pregnant later on in life, why not? So it was a really hard decision. So at the end of October, we made the decision to go forward with a liver resection. where they would remove the left side of the liver. It was a pretty big incision.
Okay.
Across the entire abdomen. After those 8 days, thinking that the worst was behind us, and 5 days later, the pathology reports came in, and I received a phone call that nobody expects to receive. It just sent shockwaves through my entire family, through me, words that I never thought in a million years I would ever hear. But here they are, you have cancer. And I remember getting the pathology report first through my portal and reading it and kind of saying, oh my God, what is this? And then about 30 minutes later, I got the phone call at that point. And I was sitting in my living room, and my mom was with me. And when those words came through, I couldn't even look her in the eye at that point. I just completely froze in that moment. I completely lost my breath. I remember starting to spiral, just kind of thinking about, oh my goodness, I'm going to die. I won't have a family. I won't get to grow old. I remember just all of those things, and everything froze, and we were just in complete shock. And the worst part, Ryan wasn't home. And at that point, it was a few hours until he was getting home. So that was another conversation that I needed to have. So that was the hardest part, just being there and having my mom there with me. Thank goodness she was there with me. But then having to tell Ryan, that was so hard. So then my doctor wanted me to come in, the surgeon, so that we can talk about the cancer a little bit more. My parents came in with me, and he was very open and honest on the phone. He's never had this type of cancer in his office before. The entire hospital has not experienced it at all. And I think at that point, it started to become real. Like, this is rare. Like, does he even know what he's doing? I thought at that point. So it was definitely scary. And, you feel like you have no control in that moment, and you just start to spiral. It started with me thinking about, why me? Why is this happening to me? I was really trying to find answers. I thought to myself, I'm a good person, I'm really nice, and I'm healthy, and I love life, and there's just so many things that I want to do. And the things that I thought about, I just want to live my life. I had a beautiful life, the life before cancer. My parents came along with me and Ryan to that first appointment, and it was really grim. And he just kind of said, he had to do his own research and figure out what it was. He had to try and consult with other doctors. And he said a lot of times, a lot of these case studies are for, 5-10 people. So it's hard to predict what this cancer is going to do. So that entire meeting, I just remember being silent and just kind of taking it all in and letting my parents kind of ask all those questions. And I just remember Ryan's face. I looked over and I swear he was going to fall over at any point. It was just, he was turning whiter and whiter as the information kept coming. And he turned to me, at the end, and he was like, what questions do you have? And he just knew, this wasn't, he said over and over again, I never in a million years expected this was going to be the result of you. Never. And he was like, you're going to fight this. And I said, you're right, I am. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what I've been doing this entire time. So he was so awesome with getting me in touch with the doctors that I see now. So I got in touch with a doctor at Memorial Sloan in New York City, which is one of the best hospitals. Also, I have a local oncologist through our hospital as well. So I get to do all my testing there, and then, they will work hand in hand. So I left that office and I thought to myself, okay, another doctor that I have to go meet, and another bit of information that I have to really intake and figure out what's going to be next. So before I left that doctor's appointment, he wanted me to get another scan that also included my pelvis, abdomen, to see if the cancer was spreading. So I made an appointment to get a CT scan, and he just wanted to make sure that it was contained. The good thing was that it was resected with clear margins, so that was really, really good. But they were concerned that they saw microscopic pieces when they looked at my liver, that my liver could essentially be filled with it at that point. So he just wanted to make sure that it didn't spread anywhere else. So on the 23rd, we drove to get my CT scan, and I just remember feeling really calm at that point and just kind of thinking, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I just need to be okay with that. And I'm going to think positively. I'm going to think optimistically, but we're doing this. So I remember just feeling really calm going into it. And Christmas Eve, my surgeon called and he said it didn't spread at all. So that was the best news that I could have received at that point in time. So, so it didn't spread. So then the next step was meeting with the doctor at Memorial Sloan. So they called me and they said, can you come in the day after Christmas? And then they said, can I come in Christmas Eve, or I'm sorry, New Year's Eve? And I just remember thinking to myself, no, I want to experience this last holiday without knowing what my future might look like. So we landed on January 2nd. So January 2nd, my parents came along with me. We got to tour the city a little bit as well when we got up there. But I remember also feeling really calm going into that appointment. It wasn't until maybe 15 minutes before I got called in that I just felt that pit in my stomach. Like, what are they going to tell me? I think we can all remember back to how you felt going into a meeting like that or the appointment like that. So I'm in the room and I'm waiting for the doctor to come in, and the doctor came in and he just had a big smile on his face. And the first things out of his mouth he said was, just live. And at that moment, I thought, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And that's exactly what I told Ryan the day I got diagnosed. You know, we sat in his truck before, after we got the news. And I remember saying, this isn't going to change anything. We're still going to do everything we planned in life. We're still going to travel. We're still going to do everything. So it was fitting. I had scans in January, later in January as well. And those were also no changes. So my scans will be every 6 months. And your mind will go to some really, really dark places if you don't stop it. And you will spiral into the what ifs and seeing your future and all of that. But it's really important. I think I said to myself, right here, right now, that's all that I can think about and all that I can worry about. Everything else, there's no point of worrying about that because it'll happen if it's going to happen and you can't control it. So control what you can control now. Because that was one of the questions we asked the doctor in New York, and we said, you know, can we still have a family? And he's like, absolutely you can. And I remember asking, like, how soon? Like, when can we do this? Like, do you recommend waiting until, you know, my first scan? Or, and he's like, no. He was like, do what you want to do. If you want to wait, that's fine. But if you want to start that process, go for it. So there's no concern on our end. So that was even better to hear those words, that, you know, I could still have a family, I could still be a mom. That was awesome in my mind. So looking forward to that. I was at a conference in May of last year before all of this started. And I got to listen to a speaker. It was called The Brain Tattoo. And we wrote a word or a phrase on our body and took a picture of that. And that phrase actually told your story. And at the time, you know, I was very new into being a fitness instructor. So the things that I wrote prioritize your mindset. And looking back at that moment and where I am now, if I didn't prioritize my mindset before all of this, the waves would have just kept knocking me down. So I think, really your mental health, even before you get a diagnosis, is so important, to prioritize your mindset. So when something like this comes, you can get right back up. So I thought that was, looking back now, I was like, wow, that was right before everything happened. And that's what I chose. And here I am now with this diagnosis, and I got right back up. You're down for a second when you hear everything and you're trying to process everything. The waves keep coming, but once you prioritize your mental health and prioritize your mindset, you're going to get back up every single time. I'm going to live my life just how I was living before. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to be scared. If anything, this was such a big reality check for me, that life is so precious and life is so beautiful that anything can change in any point in time. So it just gave me more of an ambition to go after my goals, go after my dreams, and just truly experience life.